It's a disaster of epic proportions, and we're not talking about just any movie. This is Disney's Snow White live-action remake, which was supposed to be a modern, diverse take on a timeless classic. Instead, it's been drowning in controversy, with Rachel Zegler at the center of a firestorm no one saw coming. From her controversial comments about the original film to her outspoken political stance, Zegler has managed to alienate fans, critics, and even her co-stars. Add to that a flop at the box office, and the result is a complete train wreck that has everyone asking, how did Disney let this happen? Let's find out. The Snow White disaster, Rachel Zegler, and the public backlash that wasn't supposed to happen.
Rachel Zegler has been described as a walking PR disaster for Disney's. We've heard her bag the classic story before, but there's more.
Rachel Zegler was supposed to be the next big thing in Hollywood, a fresh face bringing new energy to Disney's Snow White. The 2025 live-action remake, with Zegler in the titular role, was marketed as a reinvention of a beloved classic, with the promise of modern sensibilities and an empowered princess. But what happened instead was a PR nightmare that not even the most seasoned Hollywood execs could have predicted. It all started when Zegler opened her mouth, as so many stars do, with opinions that quickly spiraled out of control. In an interview, she slammed the original Snow White for its portrayal of romance, describing the prince as a creepy stalker. Weird, she said, dismissing the love story as outdated and harmful. For anyone who holds the 1937 animated classic near and dear, this was a slap in the face. Critics were quick to pile on, accusing Zegler of disrespecting a piece of cinematic history that Disney built its empire on. And while the internet loves a good reimagining, it turns out the nostalgia train wasn't ready for this kind of detour. Then came the backlash, hard and fast. Fans who had grown up with Snow White's innocent love story didn't appreciate hearing their favorite princess reduced to a feminist icon who doesn't need a prince to save her. For Disney, it was an unforced error. The studio had spent millions on marketing the film as the next big thing, but instead, they found themselves caught in a culture war that nobody signed up for. Was Zegler's vision of a leadership-focused Snow White a bold move or a boneheaded one? Either way, the damage was done. Love, leadership, and not so happily ever after. Zegler's radical vision for Snow White.
I mean, the original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her.
Yeah. Let's take a moment to consider what Rachel Zegler's Snow White was supposed to be. Disney's vision for the remake wasn't just about breathing new life into the animated classic. It was about rewriting the rules of fairy tale romance. Gone were the days of damsels in distress waiting for a prince to ride in on his white horse. Zegler's Snow White wasn't about finding love, she was about leading. Instead of being saved, this Snow White would be the one doing the saving. She would dream of becoming a leader, not a lover. But here's the problem. In the process of modernizing Snow White, Zegler's comments alienated the very audience Disney was hoping to charm. By ripping apart the love story that had defined the original, she left a lot of fans scratching their heads. Wasn't Snow White supposed to be a symbol of innocence, kindness, and yes, love, they asked? It wasn't that they didn't want a strong, independent Snow White. It's just that the lack of respect for the original version rubbed many the wrong way. This push to modernize the character was supposed to be empowering. Instead, it felt like an attempt to rewrite history, and fans weren't having it. The backlash wasn't just from the fans either. Industry insiders like Victoria Luxford of City AM pointed out that criticizing a classic in such a public way was never going to go over well. These films are marketed on nostalgia, she said, so to speak of it negatively seemed puzzling. Zegler's comments might have been intended as progressive, but they landed with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer. 3. Politics, tweets, and racism. How Zegler's online presence almost ruined everything. If the Snow White remake's problems were confined to a few poorly chosen comments, Disney might have been able to weather the storm. But Rachel Zegler's social media presence didn't exactly help matters. Zegler, who had previously been hailed as a rising star, soon became infamous for her political stances and her inability to stay out of online drama. A series of tweets, including a pro-Palestine post that read, "And always remember, Free Palestine," sparked a firestorm of criticism. Let's be clear, Zegler was exercising her right to free speech, but in doing so, she alienated a significant portion of her audience. The backlash was swift and unforgiving. Disney, who had banked on Zegler's star power, quickly found themselves in the middle of a heated debate that had nothing to do with princesses or fairy tales. For a studio that thrives on global appeal, this was the last thing they needed. As one anonymous source within the company put it, she didn't understand the repercussions of her actions as far as what that meant for the film. And then there was the racism. Zegler, a Latina actress, was met with a deluge of racist hate for playing Snow White, a character who, in the original 1937 film, was described as having skin as white as snow. Critics took to the internet, claiming she didn't fit the traditional image of Snow White. Zegler, of course, responded with her usual blend of defiance and wit, saying, "I get to be a Latina princess." Yet the harassment continued, with some going so far as to show up at her apartment to scream profanities. No one said being a public figure was easy, but Zegler's response was as sharp as a dagger. Losers obsessed with maintaining the bloodline purity of a cartoon princess. Still, the damage was done, and the film became a lightning rod for debates on race, politics, and Hollywood's increasingly fractured identity. 4. Disney's $270 million mistake. How Snow White became a box office nightmare. There's no sugarcoating it. The Snow White live-action remake was a colossal failure at the box office. Disney spent a jaw-dropping $270 million on the project, hoping to recapture the magic of its past live-action hits like The Jungle Book and Beauty and the Beast. Instead, they watched in horror as the film grossed a mere $43 million domestically. To put that into perspective, the film's budget alone was more than double what it earned in its first few days in theaters. That's a catastrophic loss of at least $115 million. Critics were quick to pile on, with many citing the film's lackluster performances, especially by its lead, Rachel Zegler. The film's reviews were universally scathing, with The Guardian giving it a single star and calling it an exhaustingly awful reboot. Peter Bradshaw wasn't the only one to feel that way, describing Zegler's portrayal as part of the dullest performances of their lives. Ouch! The film had been marketed as a vibrant, progressive take on a fairy tale, but instead, it became a cautionary tale of how modernizing a classic can go terribly wrong. Despite the hype, the film couldn't escape the shadow of its failure. Fans who had been excited to see Zegler in the iconic role were left feeling betrayed by what they saw on screen, and Disney was left holding the bag. The lack of chemistry between the cast, the awkward changes to the beloved story, and the off-key musical numbers all contributed to a reception that was both scathing and, frankly, hard to ignore. Disney tried to keep their heads high, but this was a blow the company wasn't going to shake off anytime soon. In an industry where numbers speak louder than words, Snow White became the most expensive misfire in recent memory. 5. The CGI dwarf controversy. Peter Dinklage calls Disney's move backwards. But is he right? As if the drama surrounding Zegler's performance and the film's underwhelming reception weren't enough, the decision to use CGI dwarfs instead of actual actors with dwarfism was yet another nightmare for Disney. This move sparked outrage, especially after actor Peter Dinklage, known for his role in Game of Thrones, publicly criticized the studio for perpetuating harmful stereotypes. Dinklage slammed Disney for what he called a backwards decision, arguing that the film was hypocritical for attempting to modernize certain elements while clinging to outdated portrayals in others. The outrage wasn't limited to Dinklage. Fellow actor Jason Acuna, also known as Wee Man from Jackass, joined the chorus of critics, accusing Disney of taking away opportunities for actors with dwarfism. The choice to use CGI dwarfs in a film that claimed to be pushing boundaries felt, to many, like a tone-deaf decision, an attempt at modernization that ended up reinforcing the very stereotypes it claimed to challenge. But Disney wasn't backing down. While some critics were quick to defend the CGI dwarfs as a creative choice that allowed for more dynamic, fantastical representations, others felt it was just another example of Hollywood missing the mark when it comes to true representation. What was supposed to be a fun, inclusive take on a classic film became a PR headache, with many feeling that Disney had once again dropped the ball when it came to doing right by underrepresented groups. But in the end, the question remained, did this decision reflect the true spirit of inclusion, or was it a poorly executed attempt to pander to a more progressive agenda? Defenders versus critics. Is Rachel Zegler the new face of Hollywood's culture wars? With every controversy comes division, and Rachel Zegler's role in Snow White has become the lightning rod for larger, polarized debates about race, politics, and Hollywood's creative stagnation. Zegler has become a figurehead of the so-called culture wars, the intersection where progressive politics, identity, and entertainment collide in a fiery battle that rarely leaves anyone unscathed. On one side, you have Zegler's defenders, who argue that she's being unfairly targeted. Many point out the double standards she faces as a young Latina actress in a predominantly white industry. In a way, Zegler is a victim of the culture wars that have plagued Hollywood for years, where anyone who steps outside the box of traditional representation is met with backlash. Supporters like Melissa Barrera, who was fired from Scream 7 for similar political stances, have come to Zegler's defense, calling out the hypocrisy of a system that rewards mediocrity while punishing boldness. On the other hand, there are critics who see Zegler's behavior as emblematic of everything wrong with Hollywood today, an industry obsessed with political correctness, identity politics, and virtue signaling at the expense of good storytelling and classic values. Smug, narcissistic, and hypocritical are just a few of the terms critics have used to describe her, and it's clear that Zegler's attitude and comments have turned a significant portion of the public against her. Whether it's her dismissal of the original Snow White or her social media posts, there's a growing belief that Zegler embodies the worst of Hollywood's current obsession with self-righteousness. Ultimately, Rachel Zegler has found herself at the heart of a storm she never asked for, caught between the fans who once adored her and the critics who believe she's out of touch with her audience. But in a world where the personal and the professional are increasingly inseparable, is there any hope for a reconciliation, or is she doomed to become the face of Hollywood's most divisive moment? From backlash over her comments to a failed box office, Rachel Zegler's Snow White journey has been nothing short of a roller coaster. Whether she's unfairly targeted or a product of her own making is up for debate. One thing's for sure, the drama is far from over. What do you think? Has Zegler been unfairly attacked, or is she the perfect symbol of Hollywood's current crisis? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more scandalous updates.